2 years Progressive Sales, 9-time President's Club winner, 9 years owner of Worldleaders Sales Solutions, 20 years experience hiring sales professionals. The list goes on and on. The bottom line is she is an incredible headhunter and recruiter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Okay, and let's get right into it. The first question is, Karen, why is it so hard to fill technology sales positions?
It's a great question, and there's such a growing market. Technology field is growing. There's new companies popping up all the time, and the supply versus demand isn't what you think it would be, but that's predominantly because of the difficulty of selling high technology solutions. It's a complex solution. It's a complex buying network, so it's finding people who really have the qualifications that we're looking for. So not people who are just looking for sales jobs, but people who truly have the qualifications that we need to get to the real decision makers, create a business case, get to what that best fit solution is, and there's only a small number of candidates who can do this really effectively.
So is it a shortage of applicants, or is it a shortage of people that can do the job?
It's a shortage of people who really, truly can do the job, meaning bring incremental revenue to your organization in a complex selling environment.
Let's take a look at that. Please describe the attributes of a top salesperson from your view.
Right. So the first, I think, thing to really keep in mind as you start to hire salespeople is that 74% of the people who are out there in these kind of sales roles today, those people are not adding incremental revenue to the companies that they work for. 74%. So
74% of the salespeople out there today are not what?
Are not adding incremental revenue to the companies that they work for. So that revenue is revenue those companies would have had with or without those performers who are in 74 percentile or below of people out there today. And this is a benchmark statistic, research-based from a predictive analytic organization, and there's several other benchmark organizations within 2% of that number.
That sounds unbelievable. Say that again, 74%.
It really is, 74%.
Okay.
So the next, level of people that you really want to start to look at, so, roughly the top quartile, specifically the top 26%, but we want to start to look at what we call, conditional performers. And these are people that we all have to hire, but what you also need is a system to bring them in and to manage them. So these are people that have between 60% and 90% of the skills, DNA, and thought processes to be successful, meaning bring incremental revenue into your company. And then only the very top 6% are what we characterize as elite salespeople. Those are the people who will be successful no matter what. They have 90% or more of the requisite skills, and they're going to be successful selling anywhere they go, but there's only 6% of them. So I think what we all need to realistically target is hiring the top 26% and also having a good management structure.
Can you just speak for a moment about management structure? Since we're saying that many of the salespeople are conditional performers, what does it take to manage them? Let's say you fill your lineup with the top 26%. What does it take to manage them?
So I'd say the short answer to that question, given that we're limited in time today, is having a structured, documented, clearly communicated sales process and having the kind of leader that spends more than half of their time coaching and motivating, and that is also able to hold accountability. And so many people say, if we're paying a lot of commission or if we hire someone who's a salesperson, shouldn't they just sell? But only 6% of them do.
Thank you. So now let's talk about getting started. Are there things that our customers should be doing here before they get started in trying to find and hire the top 26%?
So absolutely. So one of the first things, like any kind of project, you want to make sure that you have the right tools and the right requirements in place to be successful, both identifying and evaluating those candidates. So if you take, if you're looking at this slide, you want to make sure you have a performance-based job specification that has very clear tasks, accomplishments, and how those will be measured. And that really synthesizes the job description down to just exactly that. You want to have a compensation model.
Can you delve a little bit deeper into that? What does that mean specifically?
So in your job descriptions, you want to be very clear about who the customers are that the salesperson will be selling to, what the services are that they will be selling, what level of salesperson you're looking for, and then what, the tasks in your process. So is this a full life cycle sales job where they will be prospecting, qualifying, creating solutions, and closing? Or is it a junior level hunter that's going to be measured on leads in the door? So you want to look at what kind of salesperson, what level of salesperson, what markets, and then what kind of things are you going to count and measure in both quantified and qualified ways, and align that one-to-one to the task in your job description.
Mm-hmm. So let's say we talked about wanting them to prospect, assess needs, develop proposals, and close sales. What are some of the metrics that you've seen out there in setting up a good job description? And I'm dwelling on this because I very much see that many times organizations don't really know what they're looking for, so they're not sure when they found it.
Right. So the easy one that everybody goes to first, and it goes to the closing side of the equation, is revenue. And that's the one most people honestly get. If there is something in place, they get that you're going to drive a certain amount of revenue and potentially a certain amount of profit or gross margin. Backing up, though, you want to look at conversion rates and activities that will get you through that sales cycle. So, looking at historical data or looking at what you want it to be or benchmarking against industry standards, how many of those activities does a person have to do typically to average out conversions through that process that are going to result in ultimately those revenue or profitability numbers.
Great. Thank you. And from a compensation point of view?
You have to make sure that to attract the top 26% salesperson, that you have a plan that's going to attract these people, and it needs to be win-win for your organization as well. So having a plan that is benchmarked against the market, that's going to be competitive to attract the person that you want, and is structured in such a way that you win and they win simultaneously is extremely important.
Great. And I see this next tier, third-party candidate evaluation tools.
So salespeople, people joke around and talk about, is sales an art or is sales a science? Sales productivity is measurable and predictable. And there are tools out there, there aren't many, there's tools out there that can predict this behavior, not just personality assessments. The predictive validity of just a personality assessment, like a DISC or a Myers-Briggs, that tells you what the person's personality is like. There's some correlation of personality typing to being attracted to sales, but not successful. We use a tool, and there are some others that are predictive analytics. It's from a group called the Objective Management Group, but that one looks at will to sell, skills to sell, DNA of top sellers, benchmarked against the best of the best, and has a 95% plus predictability rate.
Great. So being able to utilize a third-party tool so that when you've got a good job description, a third-party tool, you're able to run that candidate through.
Objectively.
Objectively.
And not hiring people who are just a good communicator or who fit,
ones that you like, that are like you.
Or that are like me. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It puts objectivity into the process.
And then what do you mean by effective and consistent interview questions?
So same thing. You want to take your preferences and your emotions out of it. So do I like or do I not like this person based on first impressions? You want to have a set of questions that aligns to your job description, that aligns to the outcomes of the assessment, and that is consistent for every candidate, so that you're treating each person the same, you're benchmarking against a standard, and then you take the emotion and the likability factors out of it because those don't correlate to sales performance.
I've heard you ask one question in a very short period of time that really got you there with a candidate. You asked them, how do they know when a deal is qualified? Can you explain that to the group?
Yeah, so asking a salesperson how they know a deal is qualified is probably the most revealing question, and it correlates to the statistical triangle that we looked at, where I'll say, roughly between 6 and 20% of people give you a reasonable answer to that question. but you're trying to figure out if people have an objective way of looking at their customers and understanding, what are the needs, is there budget, who's in the decision-making process, is there a business case, and are we the best fit for the situation that's there? Not are we the best product, not are we the lowest price, but are we truly the best fit? And being able to objectively measure those criteria. Again, I'll say it's between 6 and 20% of salespeople that even partially do that consistently.
So the answer to that question is, I know I'm working with the right decision makers, I have a business case, there's urgency behind it, there's a relative value case, there's budget, those types of things. That's what you're looking for.
Right, and the time frame within which they'll act. Yeah.
Great, great. And then the last piece here, selection criteria, qualified to perform. What does that mean, the last tool?
Right, so these are the things that start to say, if a person benchmarks against the best of the best, they've answered your questions effectively, now you do want to match them to your culture and your environment. So do they have the interpersonal and professional skills that they look for? Are they coachable and trainable and adaptable? Do they fit the way that you work and your organization works? And are they motivated to take the job? Is there or what's in it for them to come to your organization? Because when you're hiring the top 26%, they can work anywhere. So why would they work for you? That has to be a good fit as well.
Great. Okay, so now that we've described the tool set and the evaluation process that you'll use, let's get into our top 10. We'll start off with the easiest ones first and work our way down to number 1. So number 10 is promote within. What does that mean?
Right. So this is the group of people everybody wants to hire for their sales roles. But the first place to always look for great salespeople, look to the people that are closest to you, look at the people that you already know. But what's important, and why we put this after our introduction, is because you have to still objectively compare them to the criteria that we just discussed.
Are these people that are in sales or in adjacent business units, non-sales people? What are we saying here?
It could be any of those things. So it still, though, has to be people who want to be in sales, who are motivated to be in sales, and who match criteria that you're setting forth in your job description. And you want to make sure that you're using the job description, the objective interview, the measurable assessment to assess your internal people, but they could come from multiple areas of your company.
Could that cause difficulty if you're looking at people that have high potentiality to be in sales, and you interview them, and you don't select them, and you select someone from the outside? How would that be handled?
So by setting up the process and setting it up to be, again, both qualified and quantified, it gives them the opportunity to be compared to those steps. And you're not setting them up to fail. They're not accepting a position that they're going to fail. They were considered. So there's always cases where you can't please all the people all of the time, but if handled fairly, objectively, and in a measured way, my experience is that both sides feel better for having gone through that process and they've gotten to the correct answer.
Sure. So you've used some tools to objectively evaluate them. If they make it, they know they've won it on their own, and if they don't, they understand what they need to do to get better and to get there.
Correct.
Great. Let's go to number 9, and that is post on your own website. Doesn't everyone do this anyhow?
You would think, but no. So when we look at companies' websites, most companies don't have a consistent job description for a salesperson up all of the time. And the best practice is if you're always looking for salespeople and you're always bringing in people that are the best performer on your team, that you're going to keep upping, your company's ability to sell. So why wouldn't you always be looking for that person? And competitors who are researching in the industry, they're going to be looking at your website. And that if they're looking at your website, you've likely got a top 26%er because they're doing their homework, and they'll see it, and they'll want, potentially could want to work for you.
So let's give them something to look at. If your competitors are looking at your website, let's get them to look at an open position where they could possibly come aboard. Great. Number 9. Let's go to number 8. You can walk us through this. Worldleaders self-selecting job advertisement, LinkedIn.
Right. So LinkedIn, today, and probably the people on this phone call recognize this, But today with LinkedIn and the way people prospect, most salespeople are on LinkedIn. Certainly the top 26% of salespeople are on LinkedIn because that's where they connect with their customers, it's where they connect with their peers, it's where they network, but it's where we can find them as well to recruit them. So one of the ways to get them, though, to start to look at you is by putting an ad on LinkedIn where they spend a good majority of their time anyway that really speaks to them. So it goes into what we talked about with our job description, what exactly are we looking for. The self-selecting aspect is stating very clearly that they must have the sets of skills, experience, and accomplishments identified so that you get less applicants, but more of the right applicants, and then give them the what's in it for them and speak to them in the language that they're going to be attracted to you.
So you wouldn't really put you must have, you would put suggestions.
No, I would really put you must have, and people who don't have are disqualified quickly. But by putting that, I think the way you're asking your question is, do you alienate people? Absolutely. You alienate people.
The wrong people.
The wrong people that you don't want to hire.
So someone reading a you must have,
right,
and they're a top 6%er, will that attract them or detract them?
That will attract them because they want to work with the best of the best. They're happy that they have those skills, and they want to work with someone who appreciates those skills.
So there's a psychological advantage to this.
Yeah, and they'll know that company only hires people who have those skills, and now I'm working with my peer group as a top 6%.
Is there any problem if your existing salespeople see that type of ad either on your website or on your LinkedIn profile that you're hiring? Won't that cause a problem?
No, because if people don't have those skills and they work for your company and they're not happy about that or they leave because of that, then you've opened that slot for the person who fits, or you should be replacing that person anyway. So the person who leaves for that reason should leave.
Competition breeds success?
Absolutely, especially top 6% of sales is about as competitive as it gets.
Great, great. So let's go to number 7, World Leader Self-Selecting Job Advertisement, Facebook. Isn't Facebook just a social site? Why would we put it on Facebook?
So it's just a social site that has more people on that site than many countries. So the fact that I'm a salesperson who's on there for semi-social reasons, I'm still on there and I'm seeing it. And then it is proven in recent that more and more B2B work is getting done on Facebook ever before. But that's a natural effect of the fact that it's just people are on it, it's growing, and there's more people there than there are in our country to do it, so they're going to see your ad here too.
Just curious, a year or two ago, would you have recommended Facebook?
Not for B2B complex selling.
Mm-hmm. And now you are?
Yes.
Great. Okay, great. So let's now go to number 7, Indeed.com. Many folks don't know what this is. Could you walk them through what Indeed.com is?
So Indeed.com currently is the largest job board in the world with the most traffic on it. It's also an aggregator where it pulls jobs and candidates from other search boards. So it has the most, so like LinkedIn is the highest used professional networking site, Indeed is now the highest traffic job site, and it also works more like Google or Google AdWords. So people can choose with their jobs who they wanted to reach, who they wanted to target, and you can set up different payment structures, you can impact your budget, you can segment your audience in ways like when you're using Google ad campaigns to attract the exact people that you're looking for. But this is where you'll get the most professional traffic of people who, to some degree, are proactively looking for jobs.
How does this compare to Monster or Career Builder or other job boards?
There's more people, and there's more higher level people, and more people that are in the sales field are on Indeed than any other job board.
Great, great. Okay, let's go to number 5. And this says, ask for referrals, employees, business partners, suppliers, associations, etc. And I'm noticing on this call today that we've got this range of HR directors, some VP of sales, CEOs, and everything in between. Who should be asking for referrals?
well, whoever's responsible for hiring, so that's all of those people should be asking for these referrals. But especially if you're networking with your customers, you're networking in associations, it takes a lot. If we all really think about this, people talk about what happens to them that's negative. So if someone will give you a referral, especially if it's a customer that this person sells to them, those are very reliable recommendations. People give those reluctantly, but they also, you have to ask people for it, because it's not something people just pass along. So asking people that are in your industry circles, that is a more reliable, tangible method of finding the top 26%.
Mm-hmm. We've gone through 5 now. In what sequence do you recommend doing these? Do you do one more than the other? Do you do them all? What's the thought process here?
The order is deliberate and is the order to conduct your search in. So we're starting with the closest, the easiest, the most cost-effective or no-cost methods. And if we haven't yet found our top 26%er, we have to up our game as we seek them. So the order being recommended is the order, truly that we're recommending for you to find the best people at the lowest cost in the quickest frame of time that you can.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to number 4, and that is, this looks dangerous, your top competitors. Number 4, your top competitors. Personally invite the sales representatives that consistently outsell your sales team to an interview.
Right, so we already talked about this a little bit, but we talk about turnover in sales teams, but it really is the right practice to keep replacing your top performer with someone who's going to perform better and weeding out the bottom 10% of your sales team. And if your top, let's say top 2 performers, it's going to make the other one sharper. So think steel sharpens steel. These people are attracted to that, and the people who are deterred by that are in that top 26%, so you want to bring in your top competition.
So we joked around and considered calling this webinar the Confessions of a Headhunter.
Right.
And what I'd love to do is get some confessions from you right now as far as what does that conversation look like when one company, let's say a VP of sales or a CEO, calls on the competitor's salesperson from another company. Is that an awkward conversation? What are some of the questions? How do you do that? We know that you do that day to day. How is that done?
Right. So when I'm having that conversation with people, I mean, typically what I will say, but any of you can say something similar, is that, my goal right now is I'm talking to people because I'm trying to identify the top performers in my industry who are outselling anyone in the industry, that I'm looking for the top 10%, and this is what that looks like. And maybe you know that person, maybe you are that person, but, my assessment of you is, that's what I've seen you do in the market. And it can be, maybe it's you, maybe it's a referral that you have, but now you've opened up that door for that person, to say whether they have an interest or don't have an interest.
Are there any?
Well, you're flattering them. You're telling them they're great at what they do. You're great at what you do, so I want to talk to you because I'm looking for people who are great at what you do.
Mm-hmm. And what else? What else would you ask or say to them?
I mean, I would ask.
Would you talk to them about their current position? Would you ask them questions about what they're doing, their relationship with their boss, things like that?
All of those things, because the 2 top motivators for people to change positions really come down to, is there an opportunity for them to grow, or is there an opportunity for them to be in a situation that offers more stability? But most people's what we call their buying reason, or the reason that they would change positions, it either offers more growth or more stability. So when I start asking people questions, I'm looking for just a crack in the door. So how are things, oh, you're a great performer, how's it going? It's going great. Are you making the money I want? So I'm making more money than I know what to do with. I'm great at what I do. I love my customers. Okay, here's the question. What could be different or better in your current situation?
That's the question.
And that's the question. So there, even if you've opened the door just a crack, now you can start talking about that.
What's the typical answer to that question that leads you to believe that they're interested in looking at their opportunities?
So typical answers, I mean, would be the easy one is, well, you know, with compensation, that commission's being cut. So the top performer hit the peak, they changed the plan, and now I can't make as much as I used to make.
They got the proverbial haircut.
Correct.
Okay,
That's
haircut
the most
number one.
common for a top
Sure.
performer because they outperform the intentions of the plan,
Yeah.
and the plan gets changed.
Okay. What's another one?
The other one is if they're working for a leader who doesn't appreciate and love salespeople. And now I can't hear you, but usually people are now laughing because most people don't necessarily enjoy the company of salespeople, especially if that's not the ilk you're cut from. And so working for a company that truly loves, admires, and appreciates that it's a difficult job. You know, it's not golfing all day and hanging out with my buddies and all of these things. It's not a glamour job. It's a hard job. And nothing happens till something is sold. So working for a company where people appreciate sales and what it takes is the other.
So are you saying that perhaps some CEOs or operational leaders don't really enjoy hanging around with salespeople?
Most don't.
Okay, let's go to number 3. Contingent search recruiter. So now we're going to talk about when you've exhausted every possible way and you know you've got to bring in an outside expert. What are the rules in working with the outside experts? What are some of the ideas that you can give the folks here of how to make that work for them? So contingent search recruiter, number 1. Go ahead.
Right. So contingent search is, I'll say, the first rung of outside recruiting. These are people.
First rung or rung?
Rung.
Okay.
First step on the ladder.
Sure.
First step on the ladder. It's the cheapest way to get outside help, but if you use them effectively, this is how it's going to work. Contingent recruiters are typically people who are always interviewing people in the fields that they hire because they work high volume and quick availability. So if you, the hiring person, goes to a contingent recruiter, you want to look for who they have right now. This isn't the kind of recruiter that's going to go out and headhunt for you. This isn't the kind of recruiter that's going to get deep into understanding the requirements. But what you want to know is who's in their database. So if you constrain it to send me your top 3 candidates within 3 days, that is the best result you're going to get from a contingent recruiter. They may well have the top 26%er that you're looking for, but if you don't get it, top 3 in 3 days, the odds go down from there.
Not up?
It will bring you quality.
Not up?
Down.
So either they have it or they don't.
Right.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on this?
No, I think the time boxing is the important part because what they do best is the always interviewing, and again, they're dealing in volume. They're no more important to them than the other, many customers that they're working with. So you'll get their best right out of the gate. That's when you're most important to them.
They want to close it quickly. They want to get it done.
They want to close it quickly, and they're paid only when they place. So they want to place quick, and if you take time, they will move to the quick.
Will they move the candidate somewhere else?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So contingent means you are not exclusive, and contingent means they are not exclusive. So everybody's working on a time and availability factor. So whoever, it's first come, first serve, both sides.
So let's go to number 2, and I want to make sure we're managing our time effectively here. Number 2 is the retained search recruiter. Is that you?
No, that's
I didn't say if that's your picture.
Yeah. No, the retained search recruiter is a person who's now working for you. So you're bringing a retained search recruiter to work specifically for you on the job requirement that you designed to the parameters that you set, and they will spend time for you, with you, and they will proactively go out into the market and work on pulling candidates from your competitors and finding applicants, but they're going to be dedicated to you for a period of time.
Okay.
It costs more. So that's, again, why we're putting these things in the order. So if you can find it more cost-effectively through those other means, but if you've gotten to this point, that means you haven't yet found them. You've probably got something harder to find, and this person's going to be dedicated to finding what you're really looking for and helping you evaluate whether you really found it.
Are there any tips in selecting or managing a retained recruiter?
I would recommend finding and hiring a retained recruiter that is specific to sales. Because for all the reasons that we just said, recruiters who are multidisciplined, they just, hire a person who's sold to assess people who sold, and hiring people who really know your industry verticals. So I would say when looking at retained recruiters, look either at your industry or at a sales specialty will increase, again, your odds of success because sales is different.
How long should this take?
So most firms put out schedules that are at least 120 days. So I think prepare yourself, because the average time in the retained search industry is 120 days. Okay, great.
And let's go to number one, the single most effective way, but again, it gets expensive, and now we're talking about outsourcing recruiting to an organization. So please walk us through that.
Right. So this model, it takes into consideration all of the preparation and the other 9 steps we've talked about, because a firm that outsources your recruiting efforts for you, so some of you may have looked at all of this and said, wow, that's a lot of work I have to do in addition to the job I already have, or maybe you don't have the experience or the skill sets required to do that. So it could be for any of those reasons, but you can bring in firms that can do any or all of those things, truly outsourcing the entire function. So everything from putting your requirements and tools in place, to going through those other methodologies for you, to doing the full life cycle recruiting. If you're hiring multiple salespeople, it can become your sales recruiting department. So this is a scalable, flexible model where any and all of the steps that we discussed can be done by a firm that's expert at hiring salespeople.
And there's the last sentence here.
It's like outsourcing IT or outsourcing payroll. It's the same philosophy.
Should that firm focus on recruiting salespeople, or should they focus on their own business, right? That piece of it. I said it's very expensive. Is it very expensive? What kind of cost structures and that type of thing can this be?
It can actually be significantly less expensive than retained on a per hour, per person basis. So if you have one key hire that's very, very specialized, retained may make more sense. But if you're hiring, either multiple salespeople or a more, mid-level typical kind of sales job, there are times where it can be done in a week to a couple of weeks. Hourly rates for this type of service in our region, typically will range from $75 to $125 an hour, and then, time frames can be set. So, if you start looking at retained fees that are 25 to 35% of 6-figure salaries versus spending, say 2 to 6 weeks in an outsourced model, you might be able to make more hires in a more cost-effective manner, actually.
Got it.
It depends on the specialty of what you need, though.
Great. In summary, thank you very much. In summary, how would you like to close this out? And I'm going to take a moment to go through some of the questions, and I'll be asking some questions. I just need a minute to collect them.
Sure. I think in closeout, what I want to really just encourage people to do is that the order is important, and making sure your foundation of what you're looking for and that keeping that objectivity in your process, you're vetting people out and you're evaluating people out of your process, and you're looking for that critical few, top 26%, and sustaining that discipline is the hardest and most important aspect of hiring top sales performers.
Great. So I'm going to read these questions verbatim. So one question was, in my experience, most medical tech companies have a non-compete clause that will be put in play if I try to recruit top players from the competitor. How do you suggest stealing in this case?
Right. So good question. And we definitely run into many industries who have non-compete. So first, I'm going to say in New York State they're hard to enforce. So non-competes are difficult to enforce. So I think one thing is really looking at what the content of that is, but in an at-will work state, it can be more challenging. That said, that doesn't mean it won't cost you some time or some money, that if it really does come your way in a legal action, something could happen. So what what I might suggest there is instead of looking at an exact direct competitor, is looking for people who are selling to your same customers and understand the decision makers, the business case, and the buying reasons, but you get out of that very direct non-compete situation. So one is it's a mitigated risk in New York State, but you want to know what you're dealing with and you want to review it carefully. The other is hired slightly adjacently, and what's most important is that they have a similar sales process and that they understand the customers you're selling to.
Can I weigh in on that also? Without giving legal advice, I will list a few things. One is, when you're looking at a non-compete, you're really looking at the amount of time for the non-compete to be enforceable. And usually 6 months to 1 year is the limit of enforceability. The second piece is geography. 50 to 100 miles is the geography that a non-compete generally is enforceable. So that's number two. The third is the real key of a non-compete is taking customers from one employer to the next. That's the piece of it that the courts look at very closely. Competing, though, and calling on prospects and going through other pieces, not so enforceable, right? It's really when you're going and you're trying to purge a customer. So having one medical device salesperson leave one company and go to the next, and working the same market, working the same potential leads, and working the same customers, many times that's not enforceable because you're not doing harm. You're not coercing a paying customer to leave one organization to the other. So there's some fine points to that, and we have a very good attorney that we could refer you to also. But we've worked with those many times. So that's a very good point. Oh, I'm going to go. There's two more questions, but there's one here that's going to be fun. Why do I need to use consistent interview questions?
Yeah, so when you don't use consistent interview questions, you don't have a direct comparison of one candidate to another, and you haven't necessarily addressed every aspect of what the person does. It can be conversational and you layer into your questions, but if you don't, at the core of what you're looking for, ask everyone all of the same important things, you're not making a direct comparison anymore, so your emotions are going to come right back into play. And if you don't treat everyone the same, then you put a variable into the process that you really don't know how people are going to act. In an interview process, too, the more that you can create situations that are like customer situations, you're not just going to hear what people tell you they do to sell, you're going to see how they sell. So if you've constructed consistent questions that create situations to look at how do people handle resistance, how do people handle being interrupted, do they close at the end of the interview, let's do something in a group. But you have to look at how everyone does the core functional things under the same set of circumstances, or now you're comparing apples and palm trees.
Many times you're in the interview with the candidate and the CEO or the VP of sales. I want to talk about coaching, right? How many times do you see that customer, when they like someone, they go off the beaten path, they stop asking the questions, and they start actually coaching the candidate? Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was fascinating.
Right, and that's when the evaluation stops and now you're selling them. So I think if you don't also discipline yourself to have those consistent questions, that's what's being risked. Is, okay, you've said a couple of things, now I like you, now I'm going down a different road. I have not fully evaluated you against the criteria, and you may make that wrong decision. I mean, it's really the reason why. It's
Sure.
not more complicated than that.
We've got time for one or two more questions, and a great question is, what about finding manufacturers' representatives? Can this process work for that also?
Yeah, it absolutely can, and that's a great question. And we do deal with that a lot with companies that we're working with. But the same kinds of questions, the same kinds of assessment, when you're looking at rep organizations, you still want to know the same things about how they're going to sell, how they prioritize your product or your service set, Do they understand your market? Do they have the skills you're looking for? So absolutely the same evaluation tools can be applied to a rep or a rep firm.
Okay, here's one more question. And then if I'm allowed to, I'd like to ask you one or two. So I've asked my network for referrals before and got terrible candidates. I don't want to open Pandora's box again.
Well, I think if that's been your experience with the referrals you've gotten, so at each step and at each juncture in the process, what I keep saying, and I keep saying it because I do want it to be, repetitive to the point that it annoys you so that you'll do it, is they have to be vetted and evaluated. So if a referral comes in, you still vet them against all the other criteria. The other thing I see, though, is people ask for referrals very generically. So they ask for, hey, do you know somebody who sells this? Do you know somebody who's a nice guy? Do you know somebody who's a good talker? Do you know somebody? So I think the other thing is if you look at your requirements and you ask referrals in the same framework. I'm looking for a 3-year person who sells medical devices to OEMs in the Northeast and has done these 5 things. That's different than, hey, I'm looking for a sales guy. So I think also make sure that you're asking the question in the framework of measurability.
Great, great. So 2 questions. The first one is, you've found someone, you evaluated them, you took them through an evaluation, third-party evaluation, everyone agrees, you hired the person. How long does it take to onboard them? How long before they would be considered onboarded?
1 month is the answer.
1 month?
1 month.
1 year?
No, 1 month.
Okay.
And in 1 month, what you can measure is, are they doing those activities that you've set forth, and are they getting advances in your sales cycle? So people start to say, my sales cycle is 6 months long, it's 12 months long, I can't evaluate people for 2 years, and people keep salespeople for too long. So I think the key, again, is having a plan and measurability in your onboarding process. But you can tell in 30 days whether the person is doing the right things and moving in the right direction. And if they're not, it hardly ever gets better from there. So hire slow, let it go quick, and move on to finding that right person.
So are they calling on the right customers? Are they using the right message? And are they using your sales processes in the first month?
Right.
How about after, when would you disqualify them? In other words, let's say you're not seeing what you like to see. How long will you let it go on?
Up to 3 months at the longest. And that would be, so let's go back to the idea that, 74% of people don't have the requisite skills. You have to do your part. You have to set your expectations. You have to have a management structure. You have to have an onboarding process, and you have to put your part into course correction, development, coaching. But so at the 30-day mark, if they're clearly not responding to those things or clearly just not doing the activities, then it's clear. But if you're getting, activities without results, or you're getting, consistency most of the time, then you just want to make sure that you've taken the time to develop the person, because you may have a serviceable person, but not a top 6%er. But given that there's so few salespeople that perform at that level, you need to be able to be successful with people at that level.
Okay. It looks like we're out of time. I want to invite anyone that has additional questions to call or email Karen, 585-399-0651, or you can see her website or her email address locally. We will be sending out a copy of this presentation and the recording to all participants. And I want to thank you very, very much for your participation. And keep remembering, nothing happens till something is sold. Have a great day. Thank you.